But our focus today is the iconic British loudspeaker brand, Bowers Wilkins, along with their storied history with Abbey Road Studios and Bowers Wilkins' latest flagship speaker in celebration of their 45-year relationship. And that would be the 801 Abbey Road Limited Edition. And to tell us all about it, I'm delighted to welcome Bowers Wilkins, Director of Product Marketing and Communication, Andy Kerr. Welcome, Andy.
Hi. Well, that's a great build-up, and thank you very much. I hope it's going to be worth the time, but don't worry. I hopefully try and make it interesting for you along the way. So where do we start? What do you want to talk about first?
Well, I want to start out with a bit of a mystery because I believe there's a connection between James Bond and Bowers Wilkins. So talk us through that.
So our founder served in the military. So prior to the Second World War, he was an amateur radio enthusiast. He was very interested in home radio. He tried to learn more about it. When the war broke out, which from the British perspective is September 1939, he volunteered. He joined up as quickly as he could. He went into a part of the British Army that dealt specifically with radio communication. It's called the Royal Corps of Signals. And from there, he was pretty swiftly recruited again internally 1 year later, 1940, into a new secret department of the British military intelligence. At the start of the war, it was called the Special Operations Executive, SOE. By the latter part of the war, it had been rebranded into something that's somewhat more famous, MI6. And if that's ringing bells, that's because MI6 is the same organisation that James Bond was in. John served in a special detachment based in the UK that worked with communicating to British spies. It's a place called Wadden Hall. There's a somewhat more famous part to it called Bletchley Park, which some people may have heard of. Bletchley Park's job was to listen to encrypted German transmissions and to work out how to decode them. Wadden Hall's job was to send encrypted transmissions to British spies and also to resistance fighters. So he had an incredibly different war, an incredibly secret war. Coincidentally, on the site of Wadden Hall, there were only 25 people in the whole building. He was one of that 25, and of the remaining 24, one of the other guys was a fellow called Roy Wilkins. The two guys became firm friends, and when they came back to the UK, they went into business together, and that's the birth of Bowers Wilkins in 1946. Subsequently, the one other thing that we've obviously got that helps us link us into James Bond, clearly behind the Britishness aspect of it, is the proud role that our speakers have played in contributing to the creation of various James Bond soundtracks over the years. So most famously, or most recently, I would say movies such as Skyfall, Spectre, and so forth have been recorded in Abbey Road using Bowers Wilkins loudspeakers. So for us, it was a great moment when in, I guess now thinking on it, 2022, we worked in collaboration with the guys at Eon Productions to co-develop a specific pair of headphones, which we called the PX8 007 edition.
Right.
To celebrate the 60th anniversary of the original James Bond movie, Dr. No. That was a great fun project. So it's a long, connected, but hopefully meaningful story. But at the start of it all is the founder of the company was a spy.
Wow. And the speaker that we know that we're talking about today is the 801. But talk about the naming of that speaker when the first version came out and how we got to where we are now.
So Mr. Bowers was a very passionate engineer, very enthusiastic, and I think some of his model names could be regarded as being quite literal. We produced a loudspeaker in 1969 that was designed to be the domestic monitor for 1970, the pivotal product, and he called it the DM70. In 1979, he introduced a new series, a range of loudspeakers, beginning with one model that was designed to address all of the acoustic challenges and performance challenges of the 1980s. So it was the first model for the 1980s, and it was called the 801 as a result. And that's literally where the name came from. Of course, we've been through multiple iterations since, but that's where it all began.
So 45 years of iterating. And at that time, that was the flagship model, or how many models were in the line at that time?
Not many.
Uh,
So 801 was inspired by two models that preceded it. So a very famous model in our portfolio called the DM6, which we co-developed with the inspired industrial design input of a gentleman called Sir Kenneth Grange, a very famous British industrial designer. He helped John to work on structuring the cabinet such that the drive units were no longer all in one plane on a flat baffle. So the DM6 was quite distinct for its era because rather than just being a flat baffle, it placed the base unit forward of the baffle and then the mid-range units in time alignment, some further back, but still not exactly in the same line. And then the tweeter further back still. It created a kind of distinct stepped profile. And it made the product significantly more coherent in time, but it created a quite unusual looking loudspeaker, something that we fondly call internally the pregnant penguin. Um, the other model that kind of followed that was also pretty pivotal. That was the very first tweeter on top product, where we basically take the high frequency out of the main cabinet and we stick it inside its own dedicated enclosure on the top. And that was a model called DM7, domestic monitor number 7, and that came out in 1977. So those two informed what would then become the project that led to 801. It was a 3-year project. It commissioned in 1976. It concluded in 1979 with the outcome of the 801 model. And it basically has two of those things in common. So it has 3 separated enclosures, one for the bass, one for the mid-range, and one for the high frequency, which is clearly inspired by the success we'd had with DM7. And what it also allowed us to do was place each of those separate enclosures and therefore separate drive units in slightly different positions, in time, by moving the mid-range drive unit further back from the bass drive unit and the HF further back still. So we could produce a very coherent product that was, for its era, pretty special. I guess the other thing I really want to say about the 801, and all the original brochures are still out there, so folks feel free to check all this out. It was very much designed to be both a professional product and a domestic product. In fact, the specific requirement that he wrote down in the original product brief was to produce a product that could satisfy the demands of both the professional user and the most discerning home consumer. Note the emphasis: professional consumer and the home user, not the other way around. So it had a series of requirements that are somewhat distinct for a very high performance loudspeaker. Now, we all know, because we've been to multiple shows, and you guys have been to multiple shows,
Yep.
that the one way to cut up the story when it comes to a very high end loudspeaker is to produce something which is a tower of power, if you forgive the expression. But
Right.
it's 8 feet, 10 feet, it's got 15-inch units, it's a couple hundred
Right.
pounds or more, you can't easily get it through the door of a house, and all those sorts of things. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that approach. 801 was designed to fit into a recording studio, and if we dared to come up with the idea of a product that was that big as those towers of powers, the guys in the recording studio have just said no.
Right.
It obscures the whole space. We can't work. So it's always been somewhat unusual in its category, in its very high end loudspeaker space, because it has to fill that dual role. It has to
Right.
sit across both the requirement of being robust enough, easily repairable enough, uh,
Mm.
space efficient enough to cope with being used in a professional environment, and at the
Right.
same time capable enough for discerning home users.
Mm. Well, just because you made a loudspeaker doesn't mean it automatically gets into Abbey Road Studios. So,
Correct.
how did that partnership come to be?
Again, it goes back pretty early on, right? Very early on in his time with the company, Mr. Bowers hired a gentleman who worked for EMI. EMI used to
Right.
produce a lot of technical componentry, including drive units,
Right.
alongside running recording studios, most famously EMI Abbey Road Studios.
Yep.
And a guy called Dennis Ward, who was the technical manager for EMI, to help Bowers and Wilkins design transducers, design drive units. Up
Right.
until that point, he'd been buying drive units off the shelf from other brands. The very first early generation of Bowers and Wilkins loudspeakers in the 60s, late 60s, were using imported drive units from other brands. With the advent of the 1970s, Mr. Bowers said, that's not what we want to do. We want to make our own things. So he already had it in his mind prior to the delivery of the product 801 that what he was going to do was make products that could be professionally used, that could be used as monitors that were sufficiently accurate. And in order to help him do it, he hired somebody who specialised in making professionally accurate monitors, and I think that's a really logical way of working, right?
Right.
Um, so by the time we came to 1979, we'd basically been at it for 10 years anyway, if you see what I mean, Brian. It wasn't
Yeah.
like the company woke up one day in 1979 and said, "Hey, let's make a studio speaker." We've been at that principle for some time. Um, in 1980, early 1980, basically by dint of having these connections into EMI, Mr. Bowers was able to arrange for a visit to Abbey Road Studios with the first essentially proven pair of 801s. And he went up there alongside our then chief acoustic engineer, a guy who very sadly
Right.
passed away last year, Steve Rowe.
Mm.
And the two of them basically did a demonstration for the then group of engineers working there of what the 801 could do. And so the story goes, or so I've heard it from enough people, they basically went, "That's fine, you can leave them." And they stayed there ever since, right? So it's obviously a source of some pride, clearly, to the boss. And I guess 14, 15 months after their first delivery, the projects that they had been contributing to were starting to seep out into the public domain. One of the most
Right.
famous early ones was being used as monitors for the music score for Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is clearly
Mm.
a pretty good movie to come in on, right?
Right.
If you're going to be there, swiftly followed by Return of the Jedi, right? So we'll take that one too.
Yeah. I mean, you have to you have to have insanely good speakers for the studio to select them. I mean, that's one aspect of it. But for people that don't know Abbey Road Studios, there's probably a younger audience that doesn't know the history. Can you speak to some of that?
Mm. So there's lots of really important things to say about Abbey Road. I mean, and I'm very privileged to have been there a great many times, and I'm fortunate, I think, to have some good friends who work there. Um, it's not a living museum. It's a working recording studio, and it's arguably been one of the most influential recording studios in the course of its time, and that's many decades, contributing to new approaches in sound recording technology. It goes all the way back to November 1931. It's the world's first purpose-built recording studio.
Mm.
In 1934, a gentleman called Alan Blumlein was working there, and he was working on some of the very earliest experiments in stereo. By the 1950s, of course, they were up and running full time and starting to expand what they were doing. Of course, very famously, to a lot of people who are into music in the 1960s, it was associated with the Beatles, who clearly worked there. The Beatles recorded, I think, something like 190 of their 210 recorded singles in Abbey Road Studios, all but one of their albums,
Mm.
which is a tremendous amount of output there. Of course, another very famous band there that was world renowned at the time, Pink Floyd,
Mm.
recorded the majority of their work there as well. By the late 1970s, interestingly, one of the largest studio spaces within the environment, Studio One, which is an enormous space, it's big enough to house 100 plus musicians. It was originally constructed for classical works, had
Right.
started to fall into a little bit of disrepair. So the story goes, apparently Pink Floyd would routinely play badminton in there because it was underutilized, and when they wanted to break a break or something else between sessions, they'd go in there and blow off some steam. Um, but then, of course, everything changed with George Lucas and John Williams, and the advent or the return of the orchestra to film.
Mm.
And Studio One now is home to hundreds and hundreds of world-renowned orchestral works, not only film works, but of course other things as well. Um, so it's yeah. The one thing I will say, Brian, is even now, and again, I'm going back on my early point, name dropping maybe, but I've been privileged to go there dozens, maybe tens of. I'm losing track of numbers now over the years. You still get this buzz when you walk through the door. It's hard to
Mm.
describe what it is, but it feels like it kind of oozes music soul, right? It feels like as you walk through the door, you're kind of feeling the kind of sense and the presence of the musicians. And that sounds like corny, I hear you, but
Right.
I've spoken to loads of other musicians, including some very contemporary artists, some younger performers that are perhaps nowhere near as world renowned as Pink Floyd and the Beatles, but definitely have their time in the future to come. And they still get that same vibe. They still walk through there, kind of going, "I'm in Abbey Road. I can't believe it." And
Yeah. Yeah.
that definitely makes it a very special place.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. have you had the opportunity to hear the 801s in Abbey Road, whichever version that has
Oh
been
yeah,
there?
hundreds of times, hundreds of times.
Eh,
So okay, so they're obviously let's give the full detail for those who aren't familiar with what we're talking about. Typically, they're used as the far field monitor in a control room environment. So in a studio space, I apologize if this is teaching anybody to suck eggs, but we might as well make it clear for everybody, right?
mm,
In a studio space, you have two primary environments: the live room, where the artist performs or the group of artists perform, and the control room, where you monitor what they're playing and you record it and lay it down, and then subsequently you can do whatever you want to do in terms of first mix and so forth. And the monitor speaker typically comprises two elements. You have a smaller unit, which is very close to you, which you might use to deal with instrumental strands, vocal strands, and so forth. And you have a larger monitor further away, which you use for playback of the complete signal. Um, and our 801s or different iterations of them are used as the far field monitor in a lot of the spaces. Not exclusively, because there are other speakers in Abbey Road Studios as well, but certainly in terms of the primary work, we're proud to say 801s are the ones you see most commonly in there, and that's great. Um, and yeah, so in terms of me hearing them, yeah, I mean, I've heard three older generation 801Ds in the control room in Studio 2 playing back John Lennon's Imagine, and I definitely cried like a baby.
oh, wow.
It's wild. I've heard 800D2s, this is going back some time now, playing the Beatles in the main space in Studio 2, actually in the live room, which is very rare. You don't normally set speakers up in the live room. That's pretty amazing. And yeah, I mean, obviously these days we're there quite regularly because we're working with the guys on transitioning some of their older equipment. One interesting thing, Brian, and I guess some of the audiophiles out there will relate to this, right, is studio people don't often change their equipment.
Mm,
I appreciate some people do get off on the bus of changing their equipment, but there are other people who kind of go, well, I like my record player
right,
and it works and I'm not changing it, right?
right.
Studio engineers are like that. It's a tool. They treat it as a working tool, and quite rightly.
Mm,
And
right.
if it doesn't work, doesn't, pardon me, give them trouble, so long as it works, then they won't change it.
Mm,
So there's generational mixes of 800s in Abbey Road. You'll find in some of the publicity shots, I'm sure you'll see,
mm.
1998, 1999 vintage 800s, going all the way up through the most recent iterations to the very latest D-Force versions out there.
Wow. I mean, I'm fascinated by the sound in the studio because that's the closest you can get
Hmm.
to the music when without all of the pressings onto vinyl and all the transfers onto digital, you're there getting the mix as it's coming.
Hmm.
If you're there for the live recording, you're getting that experience, or you're getting it played back through tape if you're getting it passed. But what is talk to me about maybe is there a difference, or how close is it getting to the home environment from that studio experience?
Well, I mean, obviously, every studio has its own tonality, its own character, and some of that relates to the nature of the materials that are used. Some of it relates to the acoustic form and the environment. As a rough rule of thumb, Studio One, being the largest space, has the longest RT time, reverb time. It feels the most live, the most open.
Mm,
Studio 3 is relatively speaking quite small in terms of footprint, but quite tall in terms of height. That's a space that rewards particularly rock. Pink Floyd recorded mostly in 3. Um,
mm,
and then Studio 2, I would say, is a kind of halfway between the two in the sense that it was sized to cope with smaller orchestras, not as big as Studio 1. Um, and it works well both with orchestra type performances, but also with musical rock bands as well. So, which is where the Beatles mostly worked, amongst many other bands, by the way. Um, Listening to something in the control room is different from listening in home.
mm,
Most control rooms are heavily treated. I would say that they're quite heavily damped compared to the somewhat more live acoustic that you're used to in a home environment. I think actually, although it's odd because they're much larger spaces, if anything, the closest approximation to the home is actually listening in the live room.
mm,
But what you're listening to when you're listening in the control room is you want to hear as close as you possibly can to the output of the speaker without any input whatsoever from what's coming around in the room. And then from there, you get the mix, and the mix is where the guys will add what they need to add in terms of openness, phase, whatever they're trying to do to create space, what they call the wet and dry, the sense of it feeling
Right.
somewhat more intimate, or the sense of it feeling broader and more expansive. I guess one experience that you find from being in the recording studio, Brian, is you understand much more the skill and the art of the musician, right? But
Right.
you also understand even more the skill and the art of the studio engineer, because the studio engineers do an extraordinary amount of work, and not just the simplistic things that everybody's aware of, press the
Right.
auto tune button, that kind of
Right.
stuff. It's literally spatially placing performers in the room. I mean, depending on what you're doing, what you're recording, how you're playing it back, you could be listening to multiple microphones, not just the direct feed mics, but also spatial mics that are
Mm.
capturing reverb. Some of them could be quite far away. And oftentimes when you hear a final recording, it's the output of multiple microphones in multiple locations, multiple mixes, individual musical strands being, in some cases, overlaid, remixed. It's an incredible three-dimensional. No, it doesn't. That doesn't even that do it justice. It's an incredible multi-dimensional puzzle,
Right.
and I'm in awe of them. I'm in awe of what they achieve. I guess understanding all of that, right, is the key to really understanding what the role of hi-fi is, because the role of hi-fi is not to give you the accurate depiction of the live sound experience. It's to give you the accurate depiction of what the engineer wanted you to hear, having finished the work that they've done in the recording studio. Do you follow the difference I'm making?
Yeah. Yeah.
A great illustration of that is if you go and see live music, right? Every time you go and see live music, particularly in a small venue, the drummer's way loud, right? I mean, like
Yep.
way loud, way louder, and way bigger than you would ever hear it on a recording.
Right.
But that's the skill of the recording studio engineer. They're adjusting, balancing, or sometimes, you know what they do? They make the drummer play in a separate room. They literally
Mm.
sit them outside. You go and play out there, and then they capture it and bring it back in and put it into the mix. So it's a fascinating insight into the raw talent um, of both the performer but also the studio engineer, and I can never get enough of it.
I mean, but to bring that experience, to take what the studio engineer got to hear and be able to have that speaker in your home hearing what the studio engineer heard seems to be the closest approximation you can get to that, what the artist intended. Is that the whole point?
I think so. I mean, look, our job is not to make something sound prettier than it ought to be. Our job is not to try and introduce purity to something that's supposed to be raw and harsh and emotional,
Mm.
or interject bass where there wasn't supposed to be bass. You know, those kind of things that we've all
Right.
heard. Our job is to try to relay. And Mr. Bowers used to talk about a flawless pane of glass, right? I mean, you may have heard that expression where he basically said
Yeah.
a loudspeaker should be to the ear what a flawless pane of glass is to the eye. It should just allow the signal through unfiltered, uncoloured, unadulterated. Now, obviously, everybody says that, right? And clearly, it's very hard to do, but that's genuinely what we're trying to do. So, I guess what we're trying to say is we're not going to make your music better. What we're going to do is get you as close as we can to what the people who are making the music want you to hear. Does that make
Mm.
sense? So
Yep.
it's obviously something we're very proud of, and obviously having the 801 being present in that space
Right.
means we've got a fairly good chance of doing that, right? Because if they're working with the 801, if they're doing what they're doing with the 801,
Right.
and then you are listening back on a pair of 801s, then granted, your ears are different, your acoustic environment's different. You aren't that engineer, but you're still hearing as close as we can get you to what that engineer is hearing.
Yeah. I think in the marketing literature, you guys call this true sound.
Yeah.
Is that what you're describing, or
Yeah.
just?
So 100%. So again, you go back to this story about the foundation of the company, right? So Mr. Bowers wasn't necessarily interested in trying to produce something that was the most commercial. He was trying to produce something that he felt was right. He was a very driven, and I would say specific individual in his viewpoint on things. And he said that this is another one of our many famous lines. We have some good lines. The best loudspeaker isn't the one that gives the most; it's the one that loses the least.
Mm.
So what he's trying to say is that the signal is the signal, and our
Yep.
job is to convey the signal and take it to somewhere else, and then convey it back as closely as we can to the original signal without losing any of it.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's that sense of presence, that sense of realism. We call it true sound.
Right.
And again, there are clearly attendant risks with that, Brian. Right? I mean, if the recording's
Right.
not good,
Mm.
you're going to hear it, and if the singer can't sing or somebody drops a
Right.
note, you're going to hear it. But that's, we would argue, he would argue, not the
Right.
fault of the speaker. That's the truth of the recording.
Right. Right. I mean, that's ultimately what you want. I mean, you want the uncolored. I mean, maybe audiophiles can argue that they can tweak it and they can take the EQ and all the different things that can be done to fix bad recordings. So there is that element that you can take a bad recording and in your home make it sound a little better than. But that's just personal preference. That's yeah.
I mean,
I'll let
listen,
you.
I'm not. I'm not here. None of us are here to tell you or any of your listeners or anybody else what to think. Right? I mean, if your view of what's sound great is everything with the bass or the treble adjusted, or
Right.
whatever it is you prefer to do, fine.
Yeah.
Good for you. The
Yeah.
whole point of this is it's supposed to be fun. It's
Exactly.
supposed to be something that we enjoy. I don't want to get
Right.
into fights or arguments about it, and nor should anybody else. This isn't our view is better than anybody else's view. It's just this is our view. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
There's no whataboutery here. It's just this is our view. This is what we want to do. If it's for
Right.
you, great. You're going to love it, and you're going to love the brand,
Yeah.
and you're going to love what we do, and you're going to love the other products that we make because we do it
Yeah.
all the same way. And if it's
Right.
not for you, well, sorry, but the other audio brands are available. That's the perspective, and that's one of the things I think you'll find if you talk to anybody from Bowers and Wilkins across generations, across all the different regions that we have. All the folks you'll find all line up the same way. That's the view. We're proud of it. We're not being aggressive. We're not being in any
Right.
way demeaning to anybody else's perspective. It's not at all being a critical perspective on the ways that other engineers or other brands will choose to do what they do. All power to them. We're all
Right.
supposed to be having fun. But the
Right.
Bowers and Wilkins thing is try to be as true to the original signal as you can.
And at the same time, you had talked about some of the boxiness to the earlier models, but the new version is incredibly beautifully designed with curves and
Mm,
just and the paint and the wood finishes, and now with this new,
mm.
so it's partially the being true to the sound, but you've also built a speaker that fits into a home that is basically part art, part sculpture, part speaker.
Brian, this is the thing, and I mean this, right? I think good engineering informs good design. I think you could look at I'm going to hopefully impress you here. You could look at a 67 Vet and just know that that's a fast car, right? Without really understanding about anything about engines, you could just look at that car and
Right.
understand that that's a quick vehicle. In the UK, you'd say look at Concorde or look at a Spitfire plane or something like that. They all have an engineering elegance about them that inform before you've even really understood.
Right.
The 81's like that, right? We don't make it the way that we make it look because we want to create a design object. We do understand if you're going to spend as much money as we're asking, that it probably helps if it's finished to a high standard and looks nice. But the shapes and the forms that are there are actually driven by engineering intent. They're fundamentally about delivering performance, first and foremost. So the older generation product was constructed in some cases from machined wood and materials such as fibercrete, not particularly high end in its day, but beneficial. The more modern product is cast aluminium, machined aluminium.
Mm.
It's bent pressed wood. We have a forming press which is bending 18 sheets of birch ply under 120 tons of pressure into a
Mm.
curved form, which creates the outer wrap of the cabinet, which is then overlaid over a skeleton made from beech ply, reinforced in multiple places by liberal doses of additional aluminium plate. Then it has a top and a bottom section, which is aluminium, a back section, which is aluminium. So I know I say aluminium. You guys have a different word. The turbine head that sits on top, which is, I guess, about 42, 43 pounds. It's 18 kilos, cast aluminium. And then the tweeter body sitting on top of that. And all of these elements are there to produce a cabinet which is as mechanically inert as we can make it, as free from vibration as we can make it, as acoustically open as we can make it.
Mm.
And if along the way it also looks cool, well then that's great. That's a win, right?
Right.
So we had a 45-year anniversary this year, which is that 1980 moment, that John Bowers and Steve Rowe dropping off the loudspeaker, and we wanted to kind of celebrate that. So we thought, let's work with our friends at Abbey Road. Let's discuss that story with them, and let's see if we can come up with a specific combination of finishes or materials or choices that kind of fully point to the heritage of that Bowers and Wilkins and Abbey Road experience. And the end game is the speaker that we created together. So the wood is it's a walnut. It's actually an American walnut. And then it's finished with a vintage stain, which creates what we call the vintage walnut look. And it's designed very much to kind of reflect and point to some of the famous musical instruments that are played in that space. One of the most famous ones being a piano that the Beatles commonly used to play some of their most famous musical pieces on. And it looks quite similar, I think, hue-wise and tone-wise, or as similar as we can get it. And it has a lovely kind of open grain feel to it as well. Often with wood, including some of the products that we make, they have a high gloss lacquer to them. This, you run your hand down it and you can feel the patina of the material.
Mm.
You can feel the warmth of the wood. You can feel the naturalness of it, which I love. The leather running around the top, all models have leather running around the top, but the particular color that's here is the red, which is used in Studio One on the seats throughout the space, where all the kind of famous seats that the classical music performers sit upon. It's also just a very specific, iconic Abbey Road color. You see it everywhere. The control room in Studio 2 is red. The cabling that they use to wire up their speakers is red. So we worked with them, and we got a sample of leather, hugely precious sample, by the way, from one of the seats from Studio One. And then we
Oh,
color matched that to the Connolly leather that we use. So it's really high quality leather. It's the kind of thing you'd find on the seats of very luxurious British cars. And that's what wraps around the top of the product. So hopefully it tells that story of, like,
mm.
the heritage piece of Abbey Road. And then obviously on the back, they've also got that unique plaque, which you don't have on the other products, which has both the Bowers and Wilkins logo and the Abbey Road logo.
And I believe there's only going to be 140
Mm.
of these made. Is there any significance to the 140 number?
Do you know what? No. I'd love to be able to give you a great story about why, but no, there isn't. So essentially, being realistic with you, right? There's a certain size of market for
Mm.
the 800 series loudspeaker in general. We asked our colleagues across the business, how you were going with other models that you already had, how many more you think you could sell. I mean, this wasn't really done as a cash getting exercise. I mean, clearly we're going to make money. Let's not sugarcoat it. But it wasn't done for that reason in the first place. It was done very much to have the opportunity to tell the Abbey Road story and
Mm.
to kind of push forward the premise across the board about Bowers and Wilkins' relationship with recording. So 140 kind of felt about right, 150, but it wouldn't have been more than that. It was just enough to make it special, make it exclusive.
Right.
I don't know if you may know, but we created a unique book which comes with each product,
Mm.
which has, in some cases, never before seen photography
Mm.
of historic moments in time, showing the story of the 801. One of my favourites, some of the guys who have been on conference calls with me across the business will recognise, I often have a backdrop photo, which is Roger Waters and Dave Gilmour from Floyd in the control room in Studio One. And in the corner of it, out of shot, you can just about see an 801 loudspeaker there. And we went to the photographer who obviously owned the rights to the photograph and said, can we please buy the rights to use this photograph in public because we want to put it into the book? And he said, well, sure, but do you want to see the other ones first?
Mm.
And we went, what? There are other ones? And he went, yeah, I've got loads. And he sent us through the kind of contact sheet with all the shots, and there was this one unbelievable photo of Roger Waters literally working on The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall, and
Mm.
just a beautifully fully framed 801 loudspeaker literally right next to him. And I said, we want that one. so,
Mm.
so obviously we came to an agreement with the photographer. He was very gracious, and it's a unique, never before seen, never published photograph of one of music's most famous performers recording one of music's most famous albums,
Mm.
um, with one of our loudspeakers in it, which I just adore as a thing.
Yeah, I was hoping to get a copy of this book, but it sounds like only 140 people that buy the loudspeakers are going to get this
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, I'm
But
sorry. I'm sorry. No, we're trying to keep it exclusive. What we are going to do in a spell is we'll probably put a couple of those images on some of the blogs that we'll be doing to help kind of communicate the story. But no, we definitely want the folks who've actually had the opportunity to buy the loudspeaker to have a specific and exclusive experience. So that's the reason for that.
well, I think perhaps maybe half the people who may buy this loudspeaker might already be current Bowers and Wilkins owners. And what are they getting? Let's say they're already a owner of the 801 D4, which I believe is the D4 signature. Sorry. There's the
Mm-hmm.
801 D4, and then there's the 801 D4 signature. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe the limited edition version is a copy of the signature, but
Correct.
please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you are 100% correct. So yeah, it's no performance change at all. It is what we decided to do, again, because it felt authentic to the story, is simply take the best version of the 801 that we currently make. So we haven't introduced something distinct and unique that's not available in other models. It is an 801 D4 signature, but just available with this exclusive finish and obviously with this exclusive backstory and book, and nothing more than that or nothing less than that.
Right.
I mean, obviously, a signature product is in its own right. I'm not sure if you're fully familiar. If you'd like me to go over that, the differences. It's basically um, based on a standard or regular 801 D4. It's upgraded in terms of elements around some of the mechanics of the cabinet. It has a significantly stiffer and better performing top plate, the metal top plate that houses or supports the turbine head structure, which is also mechanically damped to further reduce some of the vibration and resonance that comes off the top of that. It seems like a small thing, but if you think about where the top plate is located, it's directly
Right.
below the output of the mid-range cone. So, of course, reducing unwanted noise from that helps clean the output up from the system overall. Well, real quick, let me also just take you back one, Brian, if you don't mind. Let me just explain what
Sure.
signature is in the first place. So
Mm.
John set up a dedicated research and development facility in 1980, the Stenning Research Establishment, which is where I was very privileged to start working when I first joined Bowers Wilkins many years ago. It's known as the University of Sound. It's where
Mm.
some of the most famous and illustriously talented engineers in our history have worked, and contributed over the generations to what we do. And they all only had one boss, and their boss was the boss, Mr. Bowers.
Mm.
He was based there. He taught most of the people who work there what they do. He had very specific ways of working. In late 1987, he passed away, unfortunately, from
Mm.
cancer. And essentially, the business decided to create a product that would be a tribute to him. And the
Mm.
idea behind it was that it would carry his signature, his mark of everything that he kind of believed in engineering terms. And the original product that first came out off the back of that is the original silver signature, from 1991. So essentially, what a signature product does is it builds upon what we already know, and then it turns everything up to 11. That's the simplistic way
Mm.
to describe it, right? It takes
Right.
all of the existing engineering principles that we have and it refines them.
Mm.
So I won't go model. Let's not go bit by bit, but basically, a signature product has upgraded drive units, improved cabinet behavior, improved crossover, and then on top of that, it has a distinct and luxurious finish. Now, the regular 801 D4 signature, I say regular, it's gorgeous, but you know what I mean, is available in California Burl Gloss, wood veneer, or midnight blue metallic. gloss paint, which is the paint that we use on our famous Nautilus loudspeaker. And then essentially the Abbey Road Limited Edition version of that product is, as we discussed, available in the vintage walnut trimmed in the red leather.
I mean, this speaker, like as a young person just learning about audio, like the Bowers and Wilkins brand was the creme de la creme. When you first see that tweeter on top design, there's nothing else like it in the market. And how did that come to be?
Our forms are defined by our engineering requirements. Clearly, like I said, we also recognize that people expect and want beautiful objects. But essentially, the simplistic way of expressing it is we don't start with a beautiful shape and work out how to make it sound good. We do what we need to do to make it deliver great sound, and then we work out how to make it look beautiful, if that makes sense. That's the follow through. Within that, then you arrive at what you know or believe to be correct processes and points from an engineering perspective, such as let's take the high frequency and stick it in a separate enclosure, or let's take the mid range in the case of an 801 and put it in a separate enclosure. And then over years, you iterate. You develop, you understand more. If you look at the first generation original 801, the tweeter on top enclosure is about yay deep. It literally is the diaphragm mounting plate, motor system, back of enclosure. There's hardly anything to it. If you look at the very latest generation, it's about yay, right? It's gone like that, and you can clearly see how the Nautilus of 1993, with its incredibly long and beautiful Nautilus tapering tubes, helped inform a desire on behalf of the team to try and bring that into the world of 801. Then it was a case of how do you do it? And I go back on my much earlier point. Remember, this is a speaker that has to be robust enough to cope with the studio. I've sometimes had folks ask me about this, but to be very, very clear, the classic Nautilus, the Nautilus of 1993, is nowhere near robust enough to cope with the recording studio. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And if you took it in a recording studio, it would be broken in 5 minutes flat. An 801 has to be both beautiful and durable. I think I said that earlier on, but coming back.
Yeah.
So if you want to bring Nautilus technology into an 801, you have to understand how to execute it correctly, which is why, like I said, in the current generation of product, it's approaching £5 weight of milled aluminium in a solid piece. And because I think you've seen it in the presentation, it's a heck of a thing to hold, right? It's a properly substantial piece. Getting that right and developing it took time. But I think you can clearly see, when I go back on my earlier point, threads. Do you know what I mean? You can see lineages.
Right.
Original 801 did this, that worked, we like that. Nautilus came along and did this, well, that worked, we like that. So we put the two together and we created the 1998 Nautilus 801. That worked brilliantly. So then we developed it further, and hey presto, here we are today with what we've got.
I mean, incredible. But what is your definition of audiophile nirvana?
Great question. You forget that you're listening to speakers. I think I've spoken about this before, so you may have heard me say this, but I'll say it again. Music is the oldest form of human communication, right? A long time before people could write, they shared stories between generations using songs because it was a memorable way of passing down information. I think we are wired up. I think our DNA is wired up and programmed to respond to music. I think we unwittingly do it sometimes. Somebody can play you a song that you haven't heard for 25 years. And the minute you hear it, assuming you liked it first time around, you're bam, in that space. You're back where you were 25 years ago, and you remember the people that you were with, and you remember who you were dating and what you were doing, and what car you were driving, and all of those things just come flushing back, right? That's what music does. It's connective. So my idea of audiophile heaven is listening with a bunch of friends to a bunch of great music for hours, swapping stories, having a couple of drinks while we're doing it, and forgetting most of the time that we're doing anything that even closely approximates to work. Just enjoying enjoying the experience of listening to music and sharing the joy that comes with that, right? I love, and I know you do, I love when we go to shows. I love when I meet old friends in the industry, because what we all do, right, is, hey man, you must hear this song. We don't go, hey, come and have a look at this new coil. We go,
Right.
that's the first thing we all do. I mean, loads of
Yeah.
friends across the industry, we do that same. I just found this new song. I've just found this new piece of music. Gotta
Mm.
check it out. So that's the audiophile heaven to me. Discover, enjoy,
Mm.
remind yourself why you like it in the first place.
And do that with the 801 limited edition Abbey Road. Nothing else better.
I, I mean, listen, I'm not, in my opinion, for what I'm used to, I think they're wonderful. I mean, listen, we're not like that, right? I don't think we're like that. I think I will always give other people within the audio industry, other colleagues in different brands, their appropriate respect, because I think we should.
Mm.
If you want to buy another speaker, then okay, I would certainly urge you to at least try the one that we do.
Mm.
If you decide that it's not for you, then I understand, but you might be pleasantly surprised as well, because we think it's quite good in that understated British way. And it's taken a lot of people a lot of time and a lot of passion and a lot of effort. I would say every generation of 800 is a kind of labor of love for us at Bowers Wilkins. It
Mm.
brings the business together like no other. It brings together all people across all teams in all parts of our organization. It's the result of thousands and thousands of hours and multiple iterations of effort and experimentation,
Mm.
and hundreds of hours of listening and refinement to get to where we get to. And we've been doing it for 45 years. So at the very least, it's probably going to be, like I say, quite good. Because if it isn't, then what are
Yeah.
we doing, right?
I mean, as you say that, it makes me think you're not just buying a speaker, you're buying history.
Yeah,
You're you're buying the heritage
yeah.
of music. Like that's it's just crazy to think about
It-
the how this speaker intersects with so much of the movies and music
yeah,
that
100%. I mean, listen, that's again, that's the big part of the story behind why we wanted to do this product in the first place, Brian. We really wanted to get that across, right? You
mm,
know, Radiohead recorded OK Computer using our loudspeakers. Oasis
mm,
recorded Be Here Now using our loudspeakers.
mm,
You can go forward and backward in time. You can go back to, early Floyd stuff. You can go back to, most recent performances from last year and feature films of 101 different types and genres.
yeah,
It's it's the fabric, it's the stuff of why we like this, it's the essence of
yeah,
what we are.
mm,
And of course it's a tool, and of course it's a machine, and like I said, it's something that engineers trust and rely upon. But I'll go back on the earlier point, it's also supposed to be fun and special. So yeah, I mean, try it. I hope you enjoy it. I encourage you to go and have a listening experience. I think the guys have been doing some amazing demonstrations and some great work there, and that's hopefully again one of the attractions of going, right? Just to have that experience, even if your
yeah,
intent is maybe to buy a more affordable loudspeaker, ideally, of course, a Bowers and Wilkins. Um,
right,
go and have a listening experience anyway, because it's pretty cool,
yeah,
right?
yeah. No, it's cool. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk about this. This has been so much fun. This is Andy Kerr, Director of Marketing and Communications at Bowers and Wilkins, and honored to have this time. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you have any questions or comments, we, of course, want to hear those in the comment section below, or reach out to Bowers Wilkins without any and.com to learn more about these speakers. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.